Here is the version most of us know. There was one Christianity, and in the year 1054, it split cleanly in two: Catholic in the West, Orthodox in the East. The reasons sound almost small: how you cross yourself, what language you pray in, even what kind of bread you use. But that neat story hides something far larger. The real divide took not a year, but 1,000 of them. And underneath every argument about creeds and rituals lay a single question that had nothing to do with bread. Who was the true heir of Rome? Because Catholics and Orthodox are not two different religions. They share the same Christ, the same scriptures, the same core beliefs. The famous differences between them are real, but they are only the tip of something much deeper: a 1,000-year story of empire, politics, and one unanswered question: who has the right to lead the Christian world? And to see how that question split a civilization, you have to go back to a time when there was no single church to lead at all. Start with the assumption almost everyone makes, that Christianity began as one unified church. It never did. From its earliest days, back when Christians were still being fed to lions for public sport, the faith was scattered and decentralized. It was not one organization with one leader. It was a web of separate communities spread across the Roman world, each led by its own local bishop. There was no single head, no central office, no one voice that could speak for all Christians. In that sense, the young faith looked less like a single kingdom and more like a loose family of churches, each going its own way. When these communities disagreed, and they disagreed often, they settled it at great councils, where bishops gathered from across the empire to argue it out. And the arguments could be fierce. Within its first centuries, Christianity nearly tore itself apart over something as basic as when to celebrate Easter. Even the belief that the greatest churches were founded by the apostles themselves came later. In reality, bishops competed for rank and primacy, and their standing was decided at councils like the one at Nicaea in 325. Disagreement was not the exception. It was the normal state of things. And so different versions of Christianity bloomed everywhere, especially at the edges of the Roman world, far from any center. Groups later branded as heretics, among them the Arians and the Nestorians, spread widely, and often no one could stop them. The Nestorians carried their faith so far east that traces of it reached India and even China. For a decentralized religion, this constant branching was simply how things worked. Which raises the real question: if Christianity was always this fractured, why did one particular split, East against West, become a wound that never healed? The answer begins the moment Christianity stopped being a persecuted faith and became the faith of an empire. When the Emperor Constantine embraced Christianity, everything changed. A scattered web of communities now had to be organized into a single empire-wide church. And the moment there was one great structure, one question suddenly mattered more than any other: who would lead it? A dispute over a calendar was one thing. Control of the official church of the Roman Empire was something else entirely. Almost overnight, leadership became the prize. This one imperial church described itself with grand words: Catholic, meaning universal; Orthodox, meaning right-believing. It was meant to mirror the whole civilized Roman world, so to lead it was, in a sense, to lead civilization itself. The Bishop of Rome claimed first place. His was the ancient capital, the city of Peter and Paul, and he took the title of Pope. But the bishops of the East had a pointed reply. The emperor now lived in a new capital, Constantinople. When a council ranked Constantinople second only to Rome, it lit a rivalry between the two cities that would never fully go out. Emperors kept trying to force order onto all of this. Theodosius made the Nicene faith the official religion of the empire and worked to bring every Christian under one standard. And for a time, it almost held together. There was one Roman world and one universal church, with two great centers, Rome and Constantinople, quietly competing to lead it. But that fragile unity depended on one thing above all, that the Roman world itself stayed whole, and it did not. Because in the 5th century, the single world that held this one church together physically broke apart. In the year 476, the last emperor in the West was deposed, and the Western Roman Empire came to an end. The East survived. The West did not. And from this point on, the two halves of Christianity began to live utterly different lives, shaped by two completely different worlds. That difference, more than any argument about doctrine, is what slowly pulled them apart. In the East, the Roman Empire lived on, the state we now call Byzantium, and there, the church became part of the state itself. The Patriarch of Constantinople was not an independent power. He was a pillar of the imperial government, woven directly into how the empire was run. Church and state were, for all practical purposes, a single body. Faith and power moved together under one emperor in one enduring state. In the West, the opposite happened. The state simply collapsed. Barbarian kingdoms rose in its place, their borders vague, their institutions thin. And into that emptiness stepped the church. Its bishops were the keepers of reading, writing, and knowledge that even barbarian kings needed to govern. The church became the greatest landowner in all of Europe, and as feudalism took shape, its bishops became lords in their own right, who would rule and sometimes even go to war. And the richest and most powerful bishop of them all was the Bishop of Rome, the Pope. Then came a shock that shattered what remained of the old unity: the Arab conquests. Within a few short decades, they tore 3 of the 5 ancient centers of the church, Antioch, Jerusalem, and Alexandria, away from the Christian world. They cut the trade routes that had bound the Mediterranean together, and the old shared world came apart. Now, the two halves of Christianity were developing on opposite logic. In the East, the church was one pillar of a single great state. In the West, it was an independent power, a web of lords beneath the Pope. The same faith built on two opposite foundations. And once those two worlds had drifted far enough apart, the West stopped looking east for permission and crowned an emperor of its own. In the year 800, the Pope placed a crown on the head of Charlemagne, king of the Franks, and named him Emperor of the West. Now there were 2 emperors, one in the east and one in the west, and with them, in effect, 2 separate churches. From this moment on, the unity of the Christian church was largely a fiction that both sides kept up. The single Roman world was gone, and in its place stood 2. By now, the differences between them had quietly grown into the markers of 2 separate worlds. The wording of the creed, including an addition made in the West known as the Filioque. The language, Latin in the West, Greek in the East. The rituals, the calendars, and yes, even the bread used in communion. To believers, none of these were small. They touched the deepest questions of the faith. But beneath them all lay the deepest difference of all, and it was not about doctrine. In the East, the Patriarch stood beside the Emperor, church and state as one. In the West, the church was a web of independent powers under the Pope. 2 faiths that prayed to the same God and were built in completely opposite ways. There were warnings along the way. In the 9th century, Rome and Constantinople fell into a bitter quarrel over authority and over that same addition to the creed. For a few years, they even excommunicated one another before the whole thing was quietly patched up, almost by accident. But the pattern was clear. Every crisis was smoothed over, and yet the 2 sides kept drifting, always in the same direction, always further apart. Until, in the 11th century, the long, slow drift finally hardened into an open break. In the year 1054, the old tensions over the bread and over the authority of the Pope came to a head in Constantinople. A delegation arrived from Rome, and talks collapsed almost at once. In the great church of Hagia Sophia, a papal envoy laid a formal decree of excommunication upon the altar and walked out. In return, the patriarch excommunicated the envoys of the pope. From this bitter scene, the official split of the church into Catholic and Orthodox is dated. And yet here is the strange part. At the time, almost no one noticed. The excommunications of 1054 were aimed at particular men, not at the churches themselves, and life simply went on. In the lands of Rus, people carried on for another 50 years as though nothing had changed at all. The truth is that 1054 was not really the moment of the split. It was only the moment the long drift finally showed on the surface. The real division had been growing quietly for centuries. What truly sealed the break came a century and a half later, and it was far uglier. In the year 1204, an army of Western Crusaders, meant to be fighting far away, instead turned on Constantinople itself and savagely sacked the greatest Christian city in the world. It was a wound that would never fully heal. From that day on, in the eyes of the East, the West was no longer a rival branch of the same faith. It was the enemy. Again and again, over the centuries that followed, the two churches tried to reunite at great councils and grand ceremonies. Every attempt failed. By then, they had simply become too different. The East had deepened into a tradition that sought God through prayer and the heart, while the theology of the West turned increasingly toward reason and philosophy. Same origin, same Christ, and yet two genuinely different worlds. The distance between them had grown too vast to close. So step back and look at what this quarrel really was. In an age when the word Roman and the word universal meant nearly the same thing, and the shape of the church mirrored the shape of the civilized world, the argument between East and West was never small. It was a question of civilizational scale. Who is the true heir of Rome? Who leads the Christian world, and by whose rules? That is why a dispute that looked like it was about bread and creeds could split a civilization in two, because it was never really about the bread. It was about who inherits Rome. The disagreements are still with us today, but the world those churches were built to mirror is gone, and with it, most of what was once at stake. This channel is about looking a little more closely at the moments that quietly shape the world we live in. If you enjoy history told this way, stay with us. There is always another story worth telling.